Watch this.
Idaho state agencies say suggested budget cuts aren't just inconvenient. They'll throw a wrench in daily operations. And while agencies submitted requested reports on how they spend the state's money, the Department of Education said, we're not going to do that. Buying unlimited lottery tickets. It is an option in Idaho that some fear is being taken advantage of by out-of-state groups. New legislation could empower Idaho Lottery to stop them from making bulk lottery ticket purchases and open the door to investigate their motives. She's mysterious. Her location in Payette Lake is unknown, a creature that's added to an Idaho town's folklore. So, where in the world is Charlie? Get to know Idaho's friendly water monster. We are starting with a follow-up today. Friday, we told you about the deadline for all Idaho agencies to submit what 1% and 2% budget cuts could look like. The JFAC co-chairs made their request as they try and decide what they're going to do with Idaho's budget. Now, as we previously reported, this comes after JFAC leader Josh Tanner criticized the governor's proposed budget, calling it a budget with gimmicks that he believes won't work. So JFAC is weighing cuts to make sure there's a balanced budget. All right, Joe, we hear about these cuts often, but you crunched those numbers and you're also digging into some of the implications for some of those agencies if they have to make these cuts.
Right, and a good point that you make there. These are proposed cuts right now. So to reiterate, Idaho lawmakers on the budgeting committee, JFAC, they could soon consider additional 1% and 2% budget cuts for the next 2 fiscal years. This adds to the 3% holdbacks that Governor Little ordered by executive action last year. And state agencies say that while the numbers may sound small, the real-world impacts could be significant, affecting education, job training, healthcare access, public safety, and communities across the state. A few subheadings to dig into. 2 main ones, public safety and education. The Idaho Department of Correction, IDOC, that's the prison system, they reports that furloughs would force prisons to operate in a modified secure status, keeping many inmates locked down without access to required education and rehab programs. Meanwhile, the Idaho State Police reports that even a 1% reduction in their budget would require furloughing all troopers and eliminating Capitol Protective Services, and it really also impacts security at the state capitol in terms of response to protests and public events. They say at ISP, a 2% reduction would increase furlough hours and staffing losses. By fiscal year 27, additional cuts, they say, could eliminate ISP's SWAT team, reduce their forensic lab capacity, and slow criminal investigations as well as court cases statewide. Now, education cuts saw responses from all the higher education programs, so we'll just use Boise State as an example, similar though across the board. Boise State reports that further cuts to their institution would force them to pause hiring faculty in high-demand fields like nursing, engineering, construction management, and education, even as they say student demand continues to rise. This would mean fewer available seats in popular programs, longer times for people to graduate, and delayed entry into the workforce in Idaho. Meanwhile, graduate medical education programs, which train doctors in Idaho, they warn that additional cuts are not workable in their programs. They say, by the way, Idaho currently ranks last in the nation for physicians per capita, and residency programs are a key part of the state's strategy to recruit and retain doctors. Originally, K through 12 public schools weren't going to be impacted by the cuts, but JFAC leaders reversed course last week, asking the state superintendent of public instruction for the same reduction plans that they asked all other agencies to submit. But Superintendent Debbie Critchfield didn't submit a plan, instead sending JFAC this letter saying she will not be recommending more cuts to the budget for the current fiscal year or next fiscal year. Morgan Romero sat down with her to find out why.
What prompted you to submit this letter last week rather than responding to JFAC's ask to submit that revised budget?
I wanted to remind JFAC that I had already done it. So the assignment had already been fulfilled. I was the one, I am a constitutional officer, but I'm also over an agency that had revised their budget in early December to make the changes. We saw what the projections were. We saw all the information that had changed from when I first submitted in August. And so we took some things off. We made some changes. And the whole idea around that was so that if there were additional changes to be made, that we put forward the best budget.
Outline for me what it would look like to really shave off that money from your budget for the current and the next fiscal year.
Mid-year would for sure be more devastating than moving on, but even now as districts are looking at putting their budgets together for next year, we're talking about hiring freezes, declarations of financial emergency so that they can go into contracts. It looks like larger class sizes. It looks like program elimination. It looks like removing instructional and intervention supports for our earliest learners, particularly in reading. And we've made so much progress in so many of these areas that I hate to see us go back. Career tech programs, shop classes are some of the most expensive classes. And I do believe that there is a disproportionate negative impact on our rural schools because of the fact that they just have tighter margins. Everyone's got tight margins, but our rural schools have even tighter margins there. And so looking at numbers, okay, you can look at numbers and say, holy smokes, the public schools budget, I mean, it's over $3 billion. Certainly, there are places to cut. Go talk to your neighborhood teacher or your neighborhood principal and ask them what they've already cut and what we're already doing without, and it becomes alive. It's not just a number on a piece of paper, but it really is about kids in the classroom.
So even though lawmakers and the governor repeatedly said that the public schools budget was going to stay flat and not face reductions, Superintendent Critchfield says she willingly cut some places to get in front of this very issue. Already, she dropped a request for $50 million in additional special education funding for next fiscal year, despite what she says in this letter to JFAC as, quote, growing financial pressure on local districts and charters to provide federally required services for our highest needs students. Now, Critchfield says Idaho school districts are already very efficient with spending, so rather than cutting spending and doing more with less, she says this is actually a prime opportunity to talk about changing the public schools funding formula, modernizing it, making it right for 21st century schools. Additionally, I know, Joe, you've covered this extensively. This is a conversation going back and forth right now with Idaho lawmakers. Is it a revenue problem? Is it a spending problem? How did we get here? Critchfield, and I asked her that question, she says, you know, lawmakers have to figure this out ASAP because she keeps hearing the same exact conversation.
Yeah, and going back to the funding formula, that was something that Critchfield and Wendy Horman, formerly of the legislature, pitched last year as a major overhaul. It lost traction towards the end of the session, and then nothing happened in the end. So it is a major question, and I appreciate, too, what Superintendent Critchfield's saying, not trying to put words in her mouth, but regardless of what the problem is, you can point fingers all day. You have to make changes to avoid the situation. And I also have heard a conversation in the education world about, in the Idaho Constitution, you need a fully funded, uniform, standardized, public school system. What does that look like? I've heard some folks weigh in that, well, even if you keep flat with inflation, it's kind of cuts that way.
She wrote the exact same thing in her letter. Like, you cannot touch the public schools budget, but in times of inflation, keeping it flat is a cut. Yeah.
It's the way you look at it. It's super complicated, too.
I'll be honest. It's a lot. It's a lot. And when you go through the spreadsheets of the other departments, it's a lot as well. And looking at how those numbers translate, 1% to 2% may not sound like a lot, but it's tens of millions of dollars for these agencies.
I mean, we had a viewer just last week mention infrastructure. I mean, that's a whole nother can of worms when it comes to schools right now.
And something I wanted to add on, too, that Morgan touched on, this is budgets that are in the current year, by the way. We're in fiscal year 2026. So for fiscal year 27, cutting out of what your ask is for is one thing. Not to use a lazy comparison here, but you're building the plane while you're flying it for a bunch of agencies.
Exactly.
Tough.
And for school districts, that looks like not sending money out currently in the current school year.
It's a tough situation, guys. Thank you.
You bet.
In Idaho, you can buy as many lottery tickets as you'd like. Maybe you pool together some cash with a group of friends to hopefully win the big prize. And currently, there are no official limits, but there is some concern that out-of-state groups are using that to their advantage and taking home the Idaho lottery winnings. Under the proposed bill, bulk buying is defined as spending a minimum of $5,000 on lottery tickets in a 24-hour period. The Lottery Commission could investigate the bulk purchase and deny the payment if the winning prize was part of that purchase. Representative Joe Alfieri says it's about keeping the winning money in the gem state.
Over the last year, the Idaho Lottery Commission has paid out nearly $4 million to out-of-state syndicates and winnings. As an example, there was $1 million paid out to a group in Philadelphia called Breezy Legs, ticket purchased in Nampa, $700,000 purchased or sent to another syndicate in Philadelphia. It removes the money from Idaho. It removes the opportunity of Idahoans to cash in on a lottery and to circulate that money throughout the state. That money's going to come back in new car purchases or whatever else people may do, or just improve the lives of people.
A member of committee suggested the commission stop showing people how many lottery tickets are left or have been sold, but a member from the commission says that could take away the transparency.
We post right on our website how many tickets are left, how many top prizes are left. We want people to know. And it is fun. We have people, the guy that just won the Bucks and Trucks, you might have seen the news, he saw that. We were at 99%. He drove around by himself. He did not go above the $5,000. But these groups are hiring people, flying them into Idaho, and having them drive to every location they can find and purchasing up all of the tickets that they possibly can, and then trying to win that way.
Okay, the bill passed and is headed to the House floor. Okay, now to a proposed bill that's adding to the mask conversation in the state capitol. This would restrict when law enforcement could wear a mask, aiming to make civilians feel safer. It was introduced on Friday into committee, and the bill sponsor says this isn't about targeting ICE operations.
Imagine if you're a female or a young adult and you're stopped by a masked man with a gun, no visible identification, wearing camouflage, unmarked vehicle, how scary that would be. I'm just trying to make it a little safer for the public so that they know this is law enforcement. This isn't a masked man doing something nefarious.
Under the new legislation, there are some exceptions, like SWAT and undercover officers wearing motorcycle helmets, medical masks, and facial coverings protecting against any chemicals. There is a different mask bill that was introduced at the beginning of session. That proposed bill would increase penalties for people who commit crimes while wearing a mask. That one is back in committee. Slimy Slim, or as she's now known, Charlie. She's the centerpiece for this year's McCall Winter Carnival. We'll show you how the creature of legend has become more than just a piece of folklore. And have any comments, thoughts, or questions? Maybe you've seen Charlie yourself. We want to hear from you. Text us at 208-321-5614, and we'll share your thoughts at the end of the show. McCall Winter Carnival is underway. The annual event brings in thousands of visitors to celebrate the coldest months of the year. There, you'll find music, fireworks, and of course, snow sculptures. Many of this year's sculptures are modeled after an animal that comes from quite the legend. Somewhere in the Payette Lake, she's lurking, and while she's known as the resident lake monster, those who believe in Charlie say she's much more kind than what her monster title implies.
Of course I believe in Charlie.
A figure of myth and local legend.
Charlie is our friendly lake monster, lake creature.
She's become a celebrated figure in McCall. According to her lore, she made her home in the Payette Lake.
The first documented sighting was in 1920. But even before then, when Native Americans would come, they just some sort of weird energy.
Before she received the name that we know today.
Originally, Charlie was called Slimy Slim. Very interesting, because people said she's 30 to 40 feet long, really skinny and narrow, kind of like a snake. And then actually in the 50s, I believe, there was a contest to rename her because I guess Slimy Slim wasn't quite the right fit for that.
Locals have continued to embrace her around town with benches, playground sets, and art. And during the Winter Carnival, she's brought to life on land. And this year, she's getting even more of the spotlight.
The theme this year is Where in the World is Charlie? We've really made her the centerpiece of the entire event, not just part of the Mardi Gras parade.
So whether you believe she's real or not,
it's more of a feeling than anything.
That feeling is what keeps the legend alive.
It just seemed really important to bring the community and rally around that, since it is kind of a commonality that we've got around town.
And since this year's theme of the Winter Carnival is Where in the World is Charlie, most of the snow sculptures are dedicated to her. All right, take a look. They announced the winners and the finalists over the weekend. Bistro 45 took home the honors for the first place for a professional, while the Payette Lake's Middle School Art Club took home the dub for the amateur category. This Saturday will be the Mardi Gras parade, where a massive puppet of Charlie, as you kind of saw in those videos, will be guided through downtown, and then fireworks later that night. Now, I must say, Bistro 45 did mention that Charlie, after this warmer weather this weekend, has swam back to the Payette Lake. And it's kind of fitting, right? Given the Where in the World is Charlie theme is this year, and that she has disappeared quite quickly. Now to your 4 in 1. A nearby community college just bought a new building for students. Plus, you may need to find different parking when you visit downtown Caldwell for the next several months. But first, fuel on your commute might cost a little more than last week. Gas prices in Boise are up more than 6 cents over the last week at an average of $2.84 a gallon. It's according to Gas Buddy. That's nearly 7 cents higher than a month ago, though still about 21 cents cheaper than this time last year. Statewide, Idaho's average rose nearly 7 cents to $2.81 a gallon. Gas Buddy says Idaho drivers should still expect more increases in the coming weeks as refineries transition to summer gasoline blends. All right, heads up for people driving through Caldwell. The Kimball Bridge over Indian Creek is now closed until fall as the city works to replace the bridge. The city says the closure should not impact business access, but parking will be restricted and drivers will have to detour using the suggested green lines there on your screen. Again, the bridge is not expected to reopen until this fall. Treasure Valley Community College has a new building that will eventually become the Advanced Energy and Trade Center. The Ontario-based college says the building will be used for hands-on labs to prepare students for high-demand careers in skilled trades. The school says the purchase was made possible through state grant funds. And that's the 4 in 1 on the 208.
Well, as we just heard, the McCall Winter Carnival is still in full swing this week. And I know it's a winter carnival, but look at the next 3 days up in McCall. Might feel more like a spring carnival by Thursday. Those high temperatures reaching for 50 degrees as we continue to warm in the higher elevations. You combine that with abundant sunshine. Those snow sculptures might be sweating just a little bit by the end of the week. Here in the valleys, we continue our air stagnation advisory, which as I had anticipated yesterday, has been expanded now to include the entire Treasure Valley, almost all of eastern Oregon, and the western Magic Valley as well, as we'll continue to see our inversion strengthening as a ridge of high pressure holds steady over the western United States. So new month, same familiar weather pattern. The good news is I don't think this inversion will hold on as long as the one we saw in January. And I do think we're going to turn the corner by the end of the weekend into early next week to a colder, more active weather pattern, which hopefully will bring some fresh snow back to our mountains. Speaking of mountains, it's 46 in Sun Valley right now, 38 currently in McCall, still upper 40s to low 50s right now on our Monday evening across the lower elevations. So the rest of your Monday night, very quiet. It takes until 9 o'clock tonight to dip into the 30s. Tomorrow morning in Boise, we barely get to the freezing mark. If you wake up beyond maybe 8 or 9 o'clock, you will not need to scrape the windshield. Highs again up around 50 degrees, and that will just be the trend for the next several days. So morning lows across the region tomorrow, cold in the mountains, 20s and teens with those clear skies overhead. Upper 20s to low 30s is what we'll wake up to across the lower elevations. And then tomorrow, almost identical to today, we'll hit the low 50s, much warmer than is typical for early February in the Treasure and Magic Valleys. And look at our mountains, 44 in McCall, reaching for 50 in Haley tomorrow. As we look at the 7-day forecast, it's appropriate that today is Groundhog Day, as it looks like our weather pattern is just stuck on the same repeating loop day after day. We'll likely by the end of the work week start seeing those areas of patchy fog and stratus that may not lift much throughout the day, especially west of Boise. Good news is while temperatures stay mild on Sunday, we will bring some precipitation back into the picture by Sunday night, and then finally colder air on Monday, which will bring rain to the valleys and hopefully a shot of snow to the mountains. It is 5:22. Let's check in on our traffic conditions. You can see that sunshine is bright across much of the Treasure Valley. If you're driving from Boise westward into Canyon County, hopefully the sunglasses are handy. We are seeing some slowdowns. You see Garrity there on the bottom right-hand side of your screen in Nampa. It is slow and go there. So our current traffic flow does show that you'll be hitting the brakes off and on from the Flying Y merge point all the way out towards maybe the north side area in Nampa, picking up after you get out of Nampa into Caldwell. About a 24-minute drive from Boise into Caldwell tonight.
All right, comment time. TJ from Emmett talking about Idaho lottery. It's only fair that Idahoans buy in Idaho and other states buy in their states. You go buy a car in Oregon and you still have to pay sales tax. You're onto something. I would like to see Idahoans win money because you're kind of cheering for your own team, right? I think that's fair. Okay, Paul in Boise, 208. Debbie, Critchfield is our hero for pushing back on cutting education funding. Idaho is already at the bottom of states funding education. There were also a lot of questions too when it came to that $50 million in tax credits for private education, whether we can get rid of them. A lot of questions there, and you're saying things that we're thinking. Roger also says, in the 50s, we're talking about Charlie the monster. In the 50s, I was on my folks' dock near the mill fishing, and I saw a large dock object swimming in the middle of the lake headed toward town. By the time my parents looked up, she was gone. Lots of excitement as a 10-year-old kid.
Continue with us and watch free now on the KTVB Plus app everywhere you stream.